this. And we're going to be doing a few different things, so we're going to move a little bit quickly. So right now we're going to step into our education part. And what I want to do is show you guys how to cut out this photograph here of this motorcycle. And we've got little things here. We've got spokes, we've got mud, we've got all kinds of little things in there. Now, there's many ways of cutting out things in Photoshop. In fact, I've created entire courses on it, and I've posted all kinds of tutorials. So don't forget to go to photoshopcafe.com and also here on our YouTube channel for more of those. And you can search the YouTube channel, by the way. There's a search bar there, not the one at the top that does, but if you go into the channel and you can search through all the videos I've created there. And also in Photoshop Cafe, we've got search. So if you're looking to expand this further, I've got lots and lots of tutorials I've done on this. So as I've said, there's a lot of different ways of cutting out images, and what we're going to be doing is we just kind of look at the photo, and you want to kind of determine what is the best strategy for the photo. So in this case here, because we've got this photo, we've got a lot of blue here. The strategy here obviously is going to be to select that blue is going to be the easy way, other than, you know, we could go in here and select every little part of the motorcycle, but so sometimes you might want to see that, you know, hey, it's easier to select everything else and then inverse that selection. And don't worry if you're like, wow, this is a nice plain background, it's easy to do. Don't worry, we'll be doing this one afterwards. Okay, so a good tool to use when we're doing this, if you want to select just a color, is a color range. So if we go under the select menu, by the way, I know this might seem obvious, but it took me a long time to actually realize this. These menus are, everything in the select menu has anything to do with selections. So if you're looking to do selections, look in the select menu, it's all here. Okay, I know it seems obvious, but sometimes obvious is not always obvious, okay? So we're going to choose color range. And then we're going to get this view here. Now, this is what your one will look like. Yours should look like that, and I'm just going to move this off to the side a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to select blue. So I'm going to click once with this little eyedropper. Just click once. And by the way, the settings for the eyedropper are under the eyedropper tool. So whenever you select something from this eyedropper tool, this sample size and all that, see this? This is essentially where you're going to set it. So if you do point sample, that means it's going to pick individual pixels. And that's not really good if you've got a very high resolution image or you've got a little bit of noise or grain or something like that. You could accidentally click on one with a grain. In fact, if you zoom in really close, all those pixels are going to be slightly different. So you definitely want to be using something bigger. I like about a 5x5 average. If you're looking to be a little more precise, you could go by 3x3, or if you're working on really huge images, that's why these larger ones are there. 5x5 works quite well. So we can either select on the image, we can click on the blue there, and you want to click close to your subject. We could also, if we wanted, we could click in here. So you've got the option of clicking in there or there, it'll do the same thing. Now, in this box here, where you see white, white means it's selected, black means it's unselected. So we want to get all this blue. So what we're going to do is hit the plus. And so now when we click, rather than replacing it, it's going to add to it. So if we click in the corner, notice how that just gives us a really, really clean selection. Now the fuzziness adjusts the selection here. So if we take the fuzziness all the way to 0, we can see, oh wow, I could click in the bottom here and see what it's doing is it's picking up, because that's a lighter blue, that's a darker blue, that's a medium blue. And this fuzziness is kind of like a sensitivity. So we're going to bring that up just nicely to about there. And so what you want is you don't want to pull it too high, because if you pull it too high, see how it doesn't select this image strongly, because gray means it's going to be semi-selected. And also, you know, we just want to make sure we've got good clean edges, getting as much as we can in there. So you'll kind of get used to that. And if you want to see it better, change the selection to grayscale. And now watch what happens as I play around with that fuzziness. See how I can really see, but watch the edge there. When that fuzziness is too low, see how we get these little teeth on that edge there? And as we increase that fuzziness, it'll clean up those edges. So you want to just kind of find a nice medium area there. There's a little bit of noise in here, but we'll clean that up. Alright, so that's where we want to get started, but you can also look at things like, the spokes and the wheels. If you go too high, you're going to lose a lot. So let's just go in here about there. And then we're going to click OK. Alright, so we've essentially made a selection. Now, if we were to just use this and just hit the delete key, it's not really going to give us the results we're looking for because we want to clean this up a little bit. In fact, if I was to do that, this is what I'm not going to do it because I wouldn't do it in real life. So what we want to do now is we want to clean this up. And there's a good way to check it, and the way to check it is to use the Quick Mask tool. By the way, I'm just going to hit the D key just to reset foreground, background colors. It's always a good place to be, especially when we're going to start working with masks in a little bit. Alright, so we want to invoke the quick selection. Now, if I click up here, I can turn this into a 2-column bar so we can see there because I see my pictures there. Let me move that over. Let me just move that over to the edge there, to the other side, so it's not going to be in the way. Perfect. Alright, so if we click here, we're going to go into, this is our quick selection mode. Now you can also use the Q key on the keyboard. Now the quick mask, what it does is it basically turns it into a channel. Let me show you. So if you look here, if I hit the Q key, we have a selection, and I hit the Q key again, now we get a quick mask and it turns it into a channel. So the nice thing about this is if I hide these, you can see there's the channel there that we're working in. Black is selected, white is unselected. Alright, we need to clean that up a little bit. Now you don't have to go into the mask like I did here. You can be in the layers panel and just hit the Q key. And then we know that the areas that are red are going to be the areas that are deselected. But I want to inverse this. So let me just hit the Q key. And I'm going to hit Command Shift I, or you could go under Select, Inverse. There we go. So now we're selecting just our motorcycle and not the background. So if I hit the Q key now, you'll see that the motorcycle, or our selected area now, is red, and the rest of the area is just, showing the color through there. Now, if I go into the channel, though, it can make it easy. So go into Channels, which is under Window Channels, and if we click on the Quick Mask channel, turn off RGB, we can see it. Now, we're working with black and white. This is a lot easier to see what we're working with. Notice we've got these little weird bits of gray, so let's grab a brush and we're going to start to paint. So this is the magic of a quick mask. The magic of a quick mask is I can paint on it. You can't paint on a selection, but if you hit that Q key, it turns it into a quick mask, and now we can use brushes and we can go in here and we can paint and we can make these adjustments. Notice I'm just painting there, I'm cleaning it up. See that? I'm cleaning up all those areas. Now there's a lot of little speckles in here. So rather than have to go through and clean those up like I am right now, I can speed that up by using levels and pushing out those little dots. So if I hit Control L, there's Command L on the Mac, still with the quick mask selected, we're applying levels. So yes, you can apply these adjustments to masks, channels, not just layers. Okay, so this is the white on this side, that's the black on the other side. So we want to clean it up. Can you guys see those little speckles in there, those little gray speckles? Watch what happens when I pull that over to the left. Look at that, it just cleans it up and they're gone. So I don't have to go through and individually get rid of all those little spots. Now, at the same time, if there's little holes in here, I can clean these up. Like, see these little speckles in there, little areas? Those need to be selected. So if we go to the blacks and we pull them in, it's going to start, see how we can, it closes those up. Now this isn't too bad. The black's actually pretty clearly defined, so I'm not really too worried about that. So what I'm going to do is just click OK. And now we want to just paint in these areas here with a black brush. So let's just hit the X key, and now we're painting with black. And I'm just going to make that brush smaller. And by the way, if you hold down the Control Option on Mac, drag to the left or right, you can change the brush size. Up and down will change the hardness. Now if you're on Windows, that's going to be Option right mouse drag. Option Alt mouse drag. There is no option. Oh, that's a Mac. Okay, so let me make that hard, and we're just going to go in here now and just paint with black. And we're just going to quickly go in here, get those little areas, and see how easy it is to see when you're inside this quick mask. It's much easier to see this rather than trying to look at the colors on the image. Let's make that brush a little bit smaller. And by the way, the left or right bracket keys will do the same thing with the brush. They will change the size of the brush. And if you're using a Wacom tablet like I am, you can also use the touchscreen to do that. Alright, so now you're going to get to a point where, is this supposed to be a hole or is this supposed to show through? So this is how you can do it. Just click on the RGB here, hide that quick mask, and you can see, okay, what's going on here. And I think that's part of his clothing. Nope, that's not. That's actually supposed to be open. Alright, great. And that's how you can kind of check that. So let's go back in here. And if we hit the Q key, now it goes back to the selection again. So remember, selection, Q key, quick mask, and then in quick mask you can paint, and then go back in here. Now one of the things you could do that, I guess I'll show you how to do it, is we probably are not going to get all these spokes. So you could go in here with a very small brush, click, hold down the shift key, and click again, and see how that'll draw a straight line in between the two. So for very, very fine details like these spokes, you might lose them. And then you're just going to essentially go in and do it like that. Now I would zoom in close and then just kind of take your time on these. I'm not going to do them all, but this is how you would select all those spokes. A little bits that maybe, looks like the back one's picked up okay and we've missed a couple. You get the idea. Alright, so then we're just going to hit that Q key again. And now if we want to cut it out, all we simply need to do is just go in and we're going to create our layer mask. So let's just add a mask, hides the background, and shows that layer. Now, if you want to clean up these edges a little bit, the nice thing about working with this layer mask, because if we look at these edges, let me show you, they definitely need a little work. So we can go into the mask now and hit L for levels, and we can actually go in here, and as we play around with these, sometimes we got to blur it before we do this, but let's see how this works. Yeah, see how I can kind of clean it up by moving that, see these edges here? You can go in there and you can start to clean those up. Now, if you want to make this more effective, go into that mask there and just add a slight blur. Choose Filter, Blur, adding a Gaussian blur, however you want to say it. And we're just going to give it a very, very small amount of blur. Not a lot, just a little bit. There we go. Pardon me. And now when I go in and do these levels, Control L, watch what happens. See how now we're able to get in and just really choke these edges nicely. And that actually helps quite a bit by doing it that way. And we click OK. And once again, I showed you how to do those spokes. I did a couple, I didn't do them all, but you can kind of bring those back just by painting those into the mask with black. And then if you just wanted to just drop it against the background, we can see, you know, we've got our cutout right there. And look at that, we even got the little bits of dirt and mud and stuff like that. And it's as simple as that. Alright, so let's move in to this one here. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. Let me know. This is a little bit different. You know, we've got other ways of selecting things. You know, in Photoshop, there's a lot of one-click ways we can do it now. You know, using things like Object Selection Tool. You know, we can go in here and just go around there and it selects things. There's a lot of magical tools here. We can do Select Subject. But sometimes, you know, we just want to do this brute force selecting, which is what we're doing right now. You know, just using this quick, quick mask options here. So let's just see if we've got any questions with this right now. Ralph Nelson, good to see you, Ralph. Thanks for joining us. Just checking here, guys, for any questions before we move on. Let's see where we are. I made it seem almost easy. Thanks, Wendy. And of course, you can always check out the replay of this later. All right, so there's no real questions there. Looks like, hang on, here we go. Wondering when to set the brush to overlay before painting on the mask. Pardon me. Ashton's asking there. You don't really need to set the brush to overlay. You can just use it in regular blending mode. Just normal. You can just use it in normal, and black will paint away and white will show it, black will hide it. So you don't really need to be using the blending mode on that brush. Alright, let's do another one. And we're just going to essentially be doing the same techniques, but the difference is we've got a multicolored background here. So how do we deal with something like that? Well, the solution's actually really easy, just one piece at a time. So let's go under Select. We're going to grab our color range. Let's reset this one to none so we can see the picture. We're just going to tap there. And let's play around with the fuzziness. Look at that. And so what I'm doing right now is we're gonna select those lips by accident, but I'm not even worried about the other side. I'm just focusing on this side here. So we've got these feathers, and in between all these feathers, see, we've got these little spots here. This is how you would select trees and leaves and things like that as well, branches, those kinds of things. And then just click OK. And then let's hit the Q key for the quick mask. Now there's a problem that we're facing with this. Notice we can't see the quick mask very well because we're working against a red background, so it's not showing very well. So what we need to do is we need to change the color of that quick mask by choosing the quick mask tool, double click, and it'll bring up the quick mask options. Now what we want to do is change this to a color that we can see easily. So click on the color swatch here and change it to something like a yellow, click OK, and OK again. Now when we hit the Q key, now we can see it. It's a little orange. Let's make it a bit easier to see. You can also adjust the opacity. Let's take it to 90%. Click OK, hit the Q key, and now you can easily see the area we're working in. Alright, so what we're going to do here is let's go to our channel. And then we're going to hit Control L like we did before for levels. And we want to kind of clean up this area here. And there we go. See, it's nice and clean. Click OK. Great. So now we're going to continue. Let's go back to our layer. Hit the Q key. And so I want to cut this out. So when I'm hitting the mask, well, actually, let's have a look. I have some other areas I want to get first. Let's go back to our channels. Hit the Q key and let's just check our quick mask. There we go. So it looks like there's some gray areas. Let's get those, paint those white. And we're just going to paint out those lips and some of those areas there. And then hit the Q key once again. Alright, that's looking better. Let's cut this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Alt or the Option key and click on the layer mask, and that's going to cut that out. Now we're just going to select up here, make sure we're on the image, not on the mask. Choose the Select tool, color range, and click here. And we're going to adjust that fuzziness so we get a nice selection. Click OK. Not quite there. So why don't we do it like this? Let's go Select. And we're going to use our color range once again. Click on there, and this time use the plus. See the second one? And then grab there. There we go. We want to make sure we get all these areas. So we're adding to that selection right now. Play around with the fuzziness. Click OK. Q key. Let's go back to our channels. If it's hard to follow, you'll get used to it. You're just essentially doing the same thing over and over again. And a lot of the time when I do that, I might set up a keyboard shortcut for all of these. So let's hit the levels, Control L or Command L. We want to clean up these areas there. So let's make sure those blacks are nice and black. See that? Those whites are nice and white. Click OK. And now we want to exclude these areas that we don't want in there. So why don't we start with our lasso tool, because we know that all of this over here is not going to be included. So why don't we just fill that with white? So sometimes you can just make a selection and just fill these areas quickly so you don't have to brush everything else out. Let me grab the brush tool. And now we have these areas here. Are they going to show or are they not going to show? Okay, let's have a look there. I didn't do a very good job of that, but that's okay. So let's just go with white here. We're just going to paint that area. We can clean that up very quickly. Hit the Q key. And watch this. When we go back to our layer now, with our layer mask selected, all we need to do is fill these other areas with black. So let's just do that, and it hides it. And if we didn't get it all, no big deal. Go back again. We go back to the select tool, and you choose color range. And let's make sure we're on the layer, not the layer mask. That was the problem there. Select, color range. Tap on there and see what we can do there. Grab the plus. Now you can also drag through there if you want to. See what we can do? So you can kind of do that to add to your selection. Let's go to the quick mask. I think you get the idea here. Control L. So we're just doing this one little piece at a time. And I'm looking just at this area here. I want this to be nice and black. Almost there. There, that's nice and black. Let's hit the Q key once again, go back to our layer, choose that mask, and then we can just grab black as our foreground, and then we can just paint it away. And see what we can do. We can actually just get in there and start to paint it until eventually we just cut everything out. And then for the edges, we would just do the same thing as we did before for choking those edges. Just apply a little bit of a blur, filter blur. Just put a very, very small amount of blur in there. See how that softens those edges? And then Control L for levels. And then we can just kind of pull that in and notice how we can clean up all those edges and start to get rid of those color fringes. Now there's another way of getting rid of the color fringes too. And that's to go under here. I don't know if you guys have worked much with this. If you Control click to make the selection, you can go into Select a Mask in the Select a Mask workspace here, and you can also turn on decontaminate colors. See what that does up there? See those colors edges there? You turn that on and that will also help you with those. Alright, so let's see if we've got some questions there. Alt Option Backspace to fill with front color. Oh yes, thank you. Sorry guys, I did not tell you that. I've forgotten, so Rod, I've forgotten more than I've learned about Photoshop myself, so So Rod was saying, Colin's probably forgotten more than I've ever learned. I've forgotten more than I ever learned. That's why I write books, so I can go back and look at the reference. Alright, so let's go here, and let's move on. Let's do something different. So what I'm going to do right now, we're just to do a quick effect here before we jump into Fix My Photo. So what we're going to do is make this photograph look like a pencil sketch. And this is fun, so it's not very difficult. So for those of you who just joined us, welcome live from lockdown. We're doing Photoshop right now. We've got one more tutorial we're going to do here on turning a photo into a pencil sketch. And then we're going to go in and we're going to be fixing user submitted photos, which are photos that you guys have submitted. So why don't we go ahead and do that? And by the way, guys, if you're getting any value out of this, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm, helps people know that these live streams are going, because YouTube will send out those notifications. That's the thumbs up just for you, Ralph. And of course, he's going to be getting sick of that joke pretty soon. And it's good to see you, Rod Shelley. He's a regular. See him a lot on the YouTube channel commenting. Glad you could join us. So anyway, so we're going to do that right now, and let's do it. So in order to do this, we're going to hit Control J. Control J, just think of J as jump, and that's how we copy a layer. We can duplicate a layer, or if we've got a selection active, let me just show you. Say you got a selection, you hit Control J, it copies that selection to a new layer. So if nothing is selected, it will copy that entire layer. The other way you can duplicate a layer, of course, is to drag it to that new layer icon. So we want to get rid of the color. So Control Shift I will do it. Or we could go under Image Mode. Actually, where is it? Image Desaturate. Image Adjustments Desaturate, I believe. There we go. I use these menus so little. Sometimes I forget where they are because I like to use keyboard shortcuts. But I'll use the menus for you guys a little bit so you can see what's going on, as well as giving you the keyboard shortcuts for both Windows and Mac so you guys can get those, because I know when I was learning Photoshop, the keyboard shortcuts were so helpful. Okay, so let's duplicate that again, Control J. So now what we've got is just two black and white copies of this same image. So I want them to cancel each other out. So the way to do that is to hit Control I, so that inverts them. So we've got this black and white, and then we've got the inverted copy. So what we want to do now is blend them together in such a way as we can't see either of them. And we can do that by going under the blend modes. So under the blend modes, we're going to go down to the, where are we here? There we go. We can either go to color dodge or linear dodge. I'm going to use let's use color dodge for fun. So we're in the color dodge mode. Notice right now that those layers are there, but you can't see them because now with the combination of inverting that top one and applying that mode, that makes them invisible. So what we want to do is make only the parts that are different visible. And so we're going to do that by applying a blur. So let's just go under filter, and we're going to use the most common blur, which is the Gaussian blur. And by the way, whoever uses blur, or the other one is sharpen. So when you first come to Photoshop, this is a side note, you first come to Photoshop, you think, okay, I want to sharpen, I go sharpen, and hardly anything happens. And you go blur, and hardly anything happens. So for those of you who are new, if you want to apply a blur, Gaussian blur. And if you want to sharpen, you want to just go here, just a side note, choose the unsharp mask. So to get it sharp, you need to make sure it's unsharp. I know. All right, so just a side note, but I also did a tutorial on that last week, so check that out if you want to know more about sharpening. All right, so we're going under our blur, we're going to use our Gaussian blur. And let's move this over here. And notice now we get this etched look. If we increase it more, we start to get the sketch. Look at this. So now it looks like we're sketching with a pencil, or, you know, or go further, we get a different kind of more detailed kind of a look. So you can see we can get a lot of different looks just by doing it like that. So that's how we turn a photo into a pencil sketch, basically in 3 steps. Duplicate the layer, make it black and white, duplicate the black and white, invert it, change it to color dodge, and then blur it. Simple as that. And if you want to kind of make an interesting effect over the top of it, let me show you this. This is one of the things I love to do, is just applying a gradient overlay, just a gradient fill. And let's choose basics. I see a bunch of comments there. Oh, people are liking that. Good, thanks guys. And why don't we go in here, I want to use the legacy gradients. And these are the old gradients here. There's a rainbow colored gradient. And I can change the angle of this. So look at that, we can change the angle. And let's change the scale so we're not doing the whole rainbow, but we're just getting a couple of colors in there. Click OK. Now what we're going to do is just change the blend mode of this to color. Now I'm just drag this out to the side so you guys can see that, because I see the little video might be covering some things. So if we go under here, that's where we grab the gradient from. And you can see that there. So what we're going to do is change this blending mode now. Let's go down to color mode, and then what that's going to do is it only changes the color and it leaves everything else intact. So there's 2 of those that are just kind of magical modes that I use all the time, color and luminosity. So color protects the luminosity and changes the color. Luminosity does the opposite, it protects the luminosity and changes the color. So those are 2 very kind of useful ones that you guys might use a lot. Okay, I don't really like the colors here, so let's change them. Double click here on the gradient, brings up the gradient fill options. Now I can go in here and do all kinds of things, but I don't know if you guys were aware of this. If you click and drag, you can move that gradient right here on the document. So a lot of stuff works right directly on the documents, like what we're doing here. Same thing with layer styles. When you're working with layer styles, you can go in there and you can do it like this too. So let's see how many people of you, is that new? If that was new, let me know. And thanks for hitting those likes. And by the way, guys, if you just came here and you're not subscribed to Photoshop Cafe, I know I sound like a broken record, hit the subscribe button, and that way you'll get notifications whenever I do these live streams and tutorials. So essentially we can do that. We can play around with it. We could lower the opacity of that color and just put it in a little bit. There's other things we could do. Here's another trick. If you hit the Alt or the Option key and drag out a layer, you can make a copy of it. So what I'm doing there is I'm just Alt dragging that, and why is that not working for me? Let's just hit Control J then. And if I move this to the top and I hide, well, that's interesting. That's a very interesting effect there. So that's with that color gradient over the top. But the other thing I was going to do is just go to the regular photo and change this to color mode, and then you can use the original colors over that pencil sketch if that's something that you would rather do there. So just kind of a variation. Alright guys, I think this is about the time now when we go into the next segment here, which is Fix My Photo. And what I'm going to do is I am going to drop a link in here for you guys, just so you know how to do it. So what we do in this segment here, and thank you John, John says he loves it, there's a link to Fix My Photo. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that we are going to go here, and you guys are submitting your photos to a link I've given you on Dropbox. And these are the current ones. You know, these are some of the other ones that we've had here. And essentially, all you guys got to do is just upload the pictures there. And these are all the pictures that you guys have done, all of these ones. And so what I'd like to ask you is make sure you put your name into the file name so we know who the person was that submitted the photos. And if you can do RAW files, it's even better. You know, if all you have is JPEGs, that's fine. Unprocessed images are preferred, of course. And then just upload them there. And then what I'm going to do each week, or what I have been doing each week, is going through here and we just select a couple of photos and then we just start working on them together. And maybe you might have a problem. And if you have a problem, put that into the file name, you know, something that maybe you're wanting to fix with it. But it's kind of interesting because what we get to do is explore. You get to see how I would process the image, and also you're able to ask questions, which is really valuable, and also suggestions. So while I'm doing this, we can get requests and suggestions that people might ask for things. Like recently we did one and someone was like, hey, what does that look like in black and white? We can put it into black and white. So this is kind of a fun way we can all just kind of work here. So that link that I gave you guys there is that Dropbox link. So upload any of your images there, and don't worry, these images still belong to you. I don't claim any ownership or copyrights or anything like that. They're your photos, and we're just using them for the sake of this, and that's it. That's all we use them for. All right, so we've got a few different photos here, and one of the other things too, yeah, if you do upload them as a JPEG, try and upload them at least 2,000 pixels across so they're big enough for us to work on. The RAW files are better because that gives us more leeway to play with them. And I think that's it. Yeah, and the other thing too is just no more than 3 or 4 at the most images each. That would be nice too. All right, so why don't we start here with these. This is Tony Mule. Submitted these pictures of a rock, and it looks like he's done a edit here himself. Are you there, Tony? That's his edit that he's done to it. Looking at his pictures, I'm going to guess he's using Topaz a lot. I like what you're doing for your images. I would, however, maybe, if I'm allowed to make suggestions, I would pull back just a little bit on the filters, or the sharpening, because what's happening is you're losing some of your colors on the edges, or you're losing some of your detail here, and see here it's starting to get a little crispy, and that can happen from a little too much filtering or a little too much sharpening, and it's okay. Hopefully you can take that as a constructive criticism, which is meant purely as constructive. And this is Pirates Tower. I know the spot Laguna Beach, so I guess you are a local. All right, so let's go in here and let's open up this. So this is a Nikon RAW file. It's an F. All right, great. So this is what we've got here. And by double clicking, this will take us into Camera Raw. Now, one of the things I've learned here is I'm going to move myself over here to the side so I'm not hiding any of the tools. So Camera Raw, here it is. The new Camera Raw. Some of you love it. Some of you hate it. If you hate it, I guess it's time to learn how to love it because it's not going anywhere. This is the new interface. And it is kind of nice. So if you feel like you're scrolling too much though, a little tip would be just to right click and change to single panel mode, And then this way you don't have to scroll. So if you just want to go to your effects, there they are. If you want to go to your basic adjustments, there they are. If you want to go to your curves, there they are. Split toning, look at this, I'm not scrolling. So, you know, before you used to go into tabs, the tabs would appear one at a time. You'd hit them in the top. Guess what? Now the tabs are appearing one at a time. So I don't want to hear people saying there's got to do all this scrolling, because you don't. There's no more scrolling in this than there was in the other one. It's just a matter of getting used to it, and we've got tools and stuff here. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Okay, so we're going to go into the basics here, and let's make some adjustments. I wonder if we can recover anything from the sky, because the sky is completely blown out. Well, let's take the highlights, and we're going to recover those highlights, and we can see we've got clouds. Okay, so you know what? This is a great candidate for a sky replacement. And guess what? We're going to do a sky replacement. So why don't I just double click on there to reset that. We'll come back. We'll adjust all of this later. But the reason I'm not going to do the adjustments now is because look at this. If I started trying to make some recovery and doing some adjustments, it's going to be much harder to select this later on than it would be just like this, where it's really, really easy to make that selection. So let's do it. Let's just open it in Photoshop. So I've opened it in Photoshop, and I want to select this. Well, guess what? The color here, does this not look like a great candidate for color range? I think so, what we just worked on. So let's try that right now. So we're going to go here, choose Select, Color Range. The same tool that we used to do these difficult cutouts is really good for quick cutouts, sky replacements, especially sky replacements, because we've got little bits of trees and leaves and branches and things like that. When we go in here, we can very quickly, and I'm hitting that plus key, we're going in here and we're selecting these areas. You can just drag across if you want. And let's go into the grayscale. So we want to make sure those holes are visible. Look at that. Play around with the fuzziness. You want to take the fuzziness as low as you can. Don't go high because you lose a lot. Alright, so we're going in there with that fuzziness. And right on the verge, right there. Okay, great. So click OK. And now we've made this selection here. And what we want to do is we want to invert that. So everything to do with selections is under the Select menu. So if we go down here, there's an inverse setting. That's the Command-Shift-I. And that would be Control-Shift+I on Windows. And so we're going to inverse. So now we're selecting just this. Of course, I didn't really need to inverse it, because what I'm doing here is I'm just selecting the mask. If I hadn't inverted it, let me go back. I'm going to go back a couple of steps just to show you. So let's go back to Select. Here it is. If we didn't inverse it and you want to put it in a mask, just hold down the Alt key or the Option key when you hit on that mask icon, and that will do exactly the same thing. So if you guys wanted to do that, we're good. All right, why don't we find a sky to replace this with? Now, for myself, I have an entire library of skies. In my Lightroom library, I shoot skies. When I go somewhere and I see an interesting sky, I capture it. In fact, I capture lots of images of skies wherever I go, all different times. And I would say, you know, whenever you're shooting in a different environment, just grab a couple of skies. And then if you're using Lightroom, all you got to do is add a sky keyword, and you can build up this massive library of skies. If you don't have them, we can easily go into the Libraries panel here, and we can find them in Adobe Stock. So simply just go up here and type in sky. And then this is going to go online and start finding skies. So here's some different skies here in Adobe Stock. Lots and lots and lots of different skies. I don't know if you guys see one there you like. Let's just drag that down out of the way so I can make sure. Any questions there? No, it looks like everyone's okay right now. Great. Oh, the single panel mode. Yes. So I just right clicked in there to go into single panel. We'll show you that again when we go back in there again. All right. So what I want to do now is in the libraries here, I can just go in here. If I want to add this to my Lightroom, to my library here inside of Photoshop, I don't know what's a good one. There's quite a lot, and you can go online and look at more. Generally speaking, I would be using my own, but I don't know. Let's find a good sky here. And I haven't done this before, so this is completely unrehearsed. So we're just, why don't we go with something interesting? I don't know. Let's do this guy. And then all I need to do is just double click that. and that would take me into Adobe Stock, or I could go in here and hit this little plus button. Let's do this one here. And I will add it to my library, and now it's here. And it will always be in here, and then all I need to do is, if I want to try it out, I can just drag it into my document. You're going to see it's going to be watermarked, but it's going to let you use anything from Adobe Stock, and it'll have that watermark and it'll be lower res, but you can play around with them, and just any photo you find there, you want to see if it fits or it works. What I want to do now is I want to clip it to there. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key or the Option key. Notice we get that arrow, and then that will clip it, which of course I'm doing this wrong. I need to go the other way. Of course I don't want to be clipping it. Why don't I just drag it underneath? There we go. That's a lot easier. Alright, so we're just dragging it under there, and we can try on that sky for size. And you know what? That looks pretty good. So here's the thing. So if you decide that you like it, and you know, any of these, and you're like, you know what, I like that, I want to use it, you can buy them. So I'm just going to click on here, and if you have a subscription to Adobe Stock, it gives you so many licenses per month, and then you just click on here, and what it will do is it will go in there, and of course you don't have to license these, but if you do, notice what it does is it switches it out immediately to the full resolution image, and it gets rid of the watermark. So it's kind of nice, you know, to try all different things, show them to clients or different things like that, and then find what is really working, and then only buy what you need. And if you just want to practice, you don't have to buy anything. Just keep using the low res ones. So there we go. So we've added a sky, and so if we look at this before and after, I think it's looking quite nice with this new sky. So now I want to go in, and I'm going to do some adjustments here inside of Camera Raw. But I could just take this layer in by itself, or I could take them in together. So let's have a look at this. So if I select both of these layers, and I hold down the Shift, Alt, Command, that Shift Option Command, I call that Avengers. That's all the modifiers, you know, Captain America, Control, you know, Shift is the Hulk, Command, you know, Avengers. And then I'm gonna hit the, you guys know this one. Let me see if you get it right. Which key should I hit? The E key. E for merge. So let me just go back there to the chat. Alright, so there we go. So what I've done by doing that is I've created a merged copy of this on top. So that means if I hide these, I've got all of this as one image, but I still have the layers. So if I want that flexibility to go back and change or modify things, I have complete flexibility, plus I have this one on top. I like to put the one on top because then I can take that into Camera Raw and make adjustments on it. So let's go in here, and we're going to go under the filter here, and we're going to choose the Camera Raw filter. Now, obviously, if I was working with the original RAW file, I'm going to get a much better image because it's going to give me more dynamic range. So just so you know that. All right, so let's go in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these highlights, I'm going to recover it a little bit. Let's play around with those shadows. There we go. Let's open up those shadows a little bit. Let's give it a little bit of whites. Give it some blacks. And see what's happening here is I'm adjusting the sky and the rocks together. But if I don't like what I'm getting, because I kept these separate, I can go in here and say, you know what, I'm going to do these separate. And then we go Filter, Camera Raw. And now it's just going to work on this layer here, and I can play around with that. See that? Independently. So you have that flexibility now because I didn't merge them. If I'd merged them and said, you know what, I just want to go and work on the rocks independently, I wouldn't be able to do that because if it was merged, we would have lost the ability to go back. Okay, so I'm just going to play around with these rocks. I'm going to warm them up. This is what I would do to these rocks, by the way. I'd warm them up a little bit. I would open up the shadows just a tad, and then I'm going to set the whites and blacks. If you hold the Alt key or Option key as we increase the whites, we can see those are the areas that are clipping, which is the sky, which we don't care about. So that means I could go as much as I want because we've got that new sky, so we can go here, and I'm not really worried about these clipping. See that? The rocks are not clipping. So great. Let's do the same thing with the blacks. Now notice those start to clip. I'm holding the Alt or the Option key to show that. So that tells us how far I can go is about there. Now you don't have to go all the way there. We just want to know when it's going to start clipping. It doesn't mean you have to push it to the extreme. And let's look at the one that's really going to make a big difference here is texture. As I increase that texture, see how it's making a texture look good in these rocks. That's a newer adjustment. Back in the day, we just had clarity. And if you look at what clarity does, it gives it a punch, but look how it whitens the highlights. It kind of destroys the colors in the highlight areas. Whereas the texture here, see how it brings out that surface texture without crystallizing, that's not really a word, crystallizing it, making it sizzle. You know what I'm talking about, when it sizzles, or it becomes so sharp that those bright areas lose all their smoothness and detail and color and just become, like that. You want to avoid that as much as you can. Unless, of course, that's a look you're going for. Okay, so we've made those nice adjustments here. And, in fact, I'm going to warm this up even more. And I'm going to give it a little bit of that tone. Great. And then when you're done, just click OK. And it's going to drop it in there with that sky. And you can see, essentially this is what we're getting now. Hang on, let me pull that layers panel out. I'll put it back where it belongs. There we go. I get messy. Any of you other guys get messy with your workspace, or is it just me? And then we can see there's Tony's image here. This is what I've done with it. And let me open it up here. Let's find his image. Actually, it's going to be under bridge. Let's go into bridge here. So there's his image there. So let's just open that up. And so that's the before, and that's the after image. And you can see what we did here is we warmed up the tones to make these look a little bit more interesting. And then we also did that sky replacement. And you can see that sky replacement makes a huge difference to that. Now we could go further. We could do dodging and burning and do a lot of other things in here. So if you are here, Tony, thank you for submitting this photograph. Beautiful photo. Thank you. This is a really interesting area. All right, so let's go have a look and see a different photo. Let's see what else we've got. All right, so looking through here, we've got a bunch of images. I like this one of the balloon. Let's have a look at this. Let's double click on here and let's open up this balloon. And that's going to open into Camera Raw. I'm liking this. So I feel like what this needs is some contrast. What we need to do here is try and bring out the contrast in the sky here. Maybe punch the color a little bit. And also we want to do something with this balloon to brighten it up. So looking at this image, usually the things that make the most is setting our exposure first. And then I'm going to choose the highlights. I'm going to recover the highlights. And the reason I'm recovering these highlights all the way is I want to see how much detail we have in these clouds that we can work with. So I want to keep my eye on that. And so I don't want to set the exposure for the balloon. I want to set my exposure for the sky. So let's have a look at that. So we're just kind of playing around with that. Maybe put some blacks in there. What it's going to need here is some color. So let's push that vibrance up a little bit. Now, you know what's going to make a difference is the color temperature. Watch this. As I warm it up. Boom. See how it comes alive? So sometimes you're playing around a lot with these tone sliders and you're not getting what you want. Sometimes what you're looking for is in the color. See how by making that either way we're getting that big move we were looking for. So sometimes it can seem mysterious, like what's missing? Something's missing from this photo, and you can go in here and do all those whites and blacks and you just can't get the punch. I just did a tutorial last week. It's on photoshopCAFE, and it's also on the I've got the written and video steps, and also it's on the YouTube channel, and I say this to help you, where I did an image and I broke apart the color and the tone, so you could kind of see what's happening in the tone and what's happening in the color. They both work together, but sometimes it's not always obvious. So anyway, as you can see here, just warming that up can do so much with a lot of photos. All right, so what we want to do though is something here with the balloon. I want to brighten that up a little bit. So what did I do there? I just hit my Wacom tablet, or you can just click and that will enable you to zoom in. We'll do the flag separately. So let's have a look here. We've got the balloon here. And what we want to do is we want to grab our adjustment brush from the side here. Now these have different options. And by the way, if you're in the new Camera Raw and you're like, well, all the options are gone, they took them all away, these little triangles, if you click on them, a lot of the tools are there. So it's kind of designed so you don't have to do a lot of scrolling. And the reason I turned that on is I want to make sure auto mask is turned on. And then I'm going to turn on mask options, and what this is going to do is just going to show the mask color. You think that would be the overlay, but it's not. So notice there, it's protecting those edges because we've got that auto mask turned on. This is actually a really great example for showing auto mask, by the way. Thank you for submitting this, GG. Alright, so, and if you want to pick up those other colors, you would just start there. Alright, so we're just making that selection. All I'm doing is just painting on it, as you can see. Great. Alright, so we've selected our balloon. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hide the mask options. Now, what does that overlay do? Well, here's the thing. If I go over this pin, that pin shows what's selected. If I turn off the overlay, what it does is it hides that pin. Alright, so now we want to make some adjustments in here. So maybe we can open up our exposure just a little bit. And you can see what we're doing here. Cover our highlights, open up our shadows a bit more maybe. Hit those whites, blacks. And if we zoom it back out, let's just fit in view. You can see what we've done here. So if we look at this before and after, you can see by, you know, hitting that color really made a big difference. And also using that selective adjustment there, and see that big pin over the top of it. This is where the overlay does. Get rid of that. And there we go. We got this nice balloon. And we could lighten up the flag if we wanted, but I'm actually not. I kind of like the flag as it is there. I don't think it really needs to be brightened. It looks pretty good. All right, so what, you guys got any questions about this or anything? Let me just click that. All right, looking good. My comment on artistic creativity was not a legal one. All right, cool. All right, some good suggestions and things in there, guys. That's good. And Richard shoots his own skies. Do you have a credit? Do you have to credit skies included with a program? I mean, if you're using any of anybody else's photos, then yeah, you have to credit the photographer. You know, whether it's you're shooting a supermodel or you're shooting a sky. You obviously don't need to have a clearance, you know, a property clearance for the sky, but you definitely do have to. You should be crediting the photographer. Oh, I noticed there's a couple of little spots up here too. So why don't we fix those? So if we go into our little healing brush, we can go in and see these spots. We got some sensor dust or something. I always get those in there. But if we turn on visualize spots, you can easily see them and then just go in there and fix them. So that's one of the nice things about the visualize spots there. And then when we go back into our adjustment, they're gone, just like that. So it's very easy to get rid of those here inside of Camera Raw. All right, let's do another one. There's another one that I found kind of interesting because somebody here submitted multiple shots. And this is kind of interesting. So that's John Day. John Day, are you here? John Day, calling John. Well, there you are. Very grateful to take the time to do this for all of us. Well, thank you, John. Thank you for submitting this. So I have a question for you, John. These three, you're bracketing for HDR. I noticed the first two of these have different settings. This one here has a different setting than that one. And then there's the third. So this is the third one, your composite, and the other two were your bracketed shots, or were you submitting the three? Okay, so you've got an ambient shot was the third one. So these three, okay, got it. Okay. So thank you for submitting those images, which is really useful. Okay, so we used 2 flash shots and an ambient shot. So let's open these and have a look. So we're going to open these with Camera Raw. And here we are in Camera Raw, and I can see here he is in the taking his flash shots here, and I also saw him here doing his flash. So you're basically doing architectural shots or real estate where we're doing different brackets. So if we want to look at the speed, okay, so we've got this shot here is ambient, I'm going to take it, which is why it's very bright outside because it's darker in here. Okay, I got it. So you're shooting the ambient light. This is the light that's coming from the house and the light that's coming in through the windows. Then he's doing the flash. Now when he's using the flash, of course it's brightening it up, which means that when he's brightening it up he can slow down that shutter speed, which is capturing more detail outside of these windows. Am I correct there, John? That's what you were doing there? Real estate. Okay, so essentially what we want to do is we would want to kind of blend these together. Now in this case, I wouldn't really be wanting to do HDR. What I'd want to be doing is opening these photos and stacking them on top of each other in Photoshop. So let me go back to Bridge, and I'm just going to hit the cancel button. So in Bridge, we're going to right click here, and then actually, where did they move it to? Tools. Let's go to Photoshop. And then what we want to do is we want to load these files into Photoshop layers. So we've got these 3 files that we're opening into Photoshop, and let me just click down there so we can get in here. Okay, so now these are loading into layers. So if we look at that, first thing we want to see, is there any movement? We know we used a tripod, but what kind of movement do we have? Okay, this is good. Alright, so one of the things you can do though is just to make sure, if you select all the images and you go under the edit and we choose auto align layers and then just choose auto, click OK, what it'll do is it will just nudge these photos over, so if they're not perfectly aligned it will make sure they're perfectly aligned. So now essentially what we're going to be doing is we want to just start putting this photo together. So what we want to do is just kind of use one part of each photo for whatever we want to do. So I'm looking at this, I'm going to hide this, and I'm just wondering, okay, what is the best? As far as we can see here, this shot is clean because it doesn't have him in it, because we can see he's in the mirror there, and we can see that he's on the side there. So we definitely want to be using this image as far as the mirror, but I'm looking in the windows and that wall, it's not looking so good. Let's see what looks better. Maybe that one, or maybe that one. So that one looks better there. So essentially what we'd be doing is go into this layer and we're going to hide it. So we're going to hit Alt or Option and turn on the mask, and it's going to hide everything in that layer. Now what we would do is we would go in and we would grab a white brush. So we're going to hit the B for brush, flip this around so we've got white, and we're going to use a nice larger brush here. Make sure it's a soft edge brush. Turn that hardness all the way down. And then what we're doing is we're just painting this in. So you're essentially just painting in the area that you want to grab from that other photo. Now I'm just going to do this super quickly. You would take more detail, you would take more time, and of course you would make the nice selections and things like that around there. Make sure it's nice and clean. But see, what we're doing is we're just taking that detail. I don't know if I like this on the wall yet. Let's have a look. We're just going to paint it up here just to have a look. Okay, so we don't necessarily need that on the wall, but this wall here is looking good. How's that floor looking? Okay, the floor looks better with that. Now, of course, this depends how you want to light this, of course. You've got all these options. So in this case here, if you don't want the floor light on this side, you can hit the X key. And I'm going to drop this down about 50% and let's darken it. So if you prefer that darker floor, you can do that. And same with that wall there. I don't think I like that as much. Let me go up to 100% opacity. Painting on that mask. And I'm going to put the old wall back. And let's have a look at the second image here. This one definitely has a better wall. So I'm going to use the wall off this shot. So I think you guys can kind of see what we're doing here. Now you could spend a bit of time doing this. So we're hiding that. I'm going to paint with white. I like that wall, so we're going to paint in that wall. Now once again, I would be using a nicer brush there. I'm just doing this very, very quickly. So I would mask off these edges, which I'm not doing right now because I just for the sake of time. And then you're using that. So now we're using the roof and the windows, that wall from this. We're doing that wall from there. And of course, this one's getting rid of his reflection in the mirror and different things like that. So now we're starting to blend the images together. Now, I think that's looking pretty good, you know, for the amount of time I've spent on it. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to play around with this, by the way. Now, when I would be doing this in the real world, I'll just show you. I would be way up here. I would be, you know, grabbing things like the polygon lasso tool, and I would get in really close, and I would go in here, and I would select those edges like this before I went in and did that masking. So when I'm here, just to show you, you know, I would be doing it much cleaner. See, we get this nice clean edge now. And if I invert this, Command-Shift-I, we're going down here. Now we'd be in there. I would be, see what I'm doing? See, now we get that nice edge. Much better. Yeah, so when you go and do that, make sure you use those selection tools. The other one that's really useful is this object selection tool. So, you know, we could be doing things like maybe you just want to do the foot locker. You just go around it with the object selection. It'll select it. And then you just go in here, see which one has the best lighting, and use that. Now, one of the things you got to be aware of, too, when you're doing that is just be careful with the shadows. Make sure that the shadows are matching, because when he's using the different flashes, you're creating different directions of shadow, so just make sure that those are consistent. And so essentially, you know, that's what I would be doing with that. And I imagine that's probably how you're doing it, John. Fusion or HDR is automatic blending by pushing a button in Lightroom or Photomatics. So someone, I guess, was someone asking a difference? Oh, here we go. Difference between focus stacking. We're not doing focus stacking, we're doing exposure stacking here. And HDR. Yes, HDR just blends all the tones together. And we do what's called tone mapping, whereas here we're actually masking out the different photographs. Now the other big difference between HDR and this is if you were working in HDR, you would be doing 3 different exposures. You would have a very dark photo that you would be taking to bring out the area, you know, like outside the window here. You'd want to bring out these detail in the bright areas, so you would be shooting that with a quicker shutter speed. And then for the areas of very, very dark areas, the shadows, you would do another one with a very slow shutter speed, which allows you to get more light into the very dark shadow areas, and then a regular photo in the middle. And then you would merge those together with tone mapping. And that would give us the full dynamic range. Whereas what he's doing here with the shooting and exposing these flashes in different areas is he's lighting up the different areas and allowing us to see, you know, colors, textures, different things like that, because it's also altering the angle of the lighting, which enables you to see more texture, different things like that. And then what we do, and 2 of these are different exposures, but 2 of these are the same exposures but lit from different areas. So it's just, you know, a different way of working, but I think I kind of like working this way too. It's fun. So anyway, guys, hopefully that was useful. And I think we're pretty much, let me see what John says. Agreed. I've only been doing this for 6 months and tried both. Let me see. How do we get a really good HDR so I don't have to do it that way? I actually have a tutorial on that exactly. Let me show you where it is.